I used to believe that loneliness only existed in empty houses. I was wrong. It can live comfortably inside a marriage, sharing a bed, eating dinner at the same table, exchanging polite words that mean nothing. My husband and I weren't fighting. We weren't unhappy in any dramatic way. We were just absent. He left early, came home late, and when he was around, his mind stayed somewhere else. Work, stress, exhaustion, there was always a reason. Over time, I stopped asking for attention because I hated feeling like a burden. Our house started reflecting that distance. Little things went unattended. A broken light, a loose step, the bluff in the backyard that had been damaged during a storm months ago. I mentioned it more than once. He nodded, said he'd get to it, and never did. Eventually, he suggested we ask the neighbor if his son could handle it. He said it casually, like it didn't matter who came or when. That indifference stung more than I expected. I knew the neighbor's son only in passing. I'd watched him grow up from a distance, polite waves, brief greetings. He wasn't someone I thought about. When he agreed to come take a look at the bluff, it felt like a practical solution, nothing more. Still, I remember feeling oddly relieved, like anything, was finally being addressed. That afternoon, as I waited for him to arrive, I realized how quiet the house had become. No conversation, no shared plans, just space filled with unspoken disappointments. I told myself this was normal. That marriages settle into routines. That wanting to be noticed was childish. I had no idea that such an ordinary decision, made out of convenience and neglect, was about to expose everything I'd been pretending not to feel. He started coming by in the afternoons, usually when my husband wasn't home. At first, it was strictly about the work. He measured, asked practical questions, explained what needed to be fixed. His tone was respectful, almost careful. I stayed nearby out of politeness, offering water, making small talk that felt harmless. But with each visit, the conversations stretched longer than necessary. He asked questions my husband never did. How long we'd lived there. Whether I liked the neighborhood. If I ever thought about moving. They were simple questions, but they required real answers. I caught myself speaking more freely than I had in years. He listened without interrupting, without checking his phone, without making me feel like my words were inconvenient. I noticed things I told myself didn't matter. The way he remembered small details. The way he smiled when I joked about things that used to frustrate me. I began timing my day around his visits, choosing different clothes without admitting why. Every time I told myself it was innocent, that I was reading too much into it, yet I felt a spark of anticipation I hadn't felt in a long time. My husband barely noticed the progress on the bluff, let alone the change in me. When I mentioned the work, he shrugged, satisfied it was being handled. That indifference made the contrast sharper. With one man, I felt invisible. With the other, I felt seen in a way that scared me. I set quiet rules for myself. No flirting. No personal boundaries crossed. I reminded myself I was married and this was temporary. Still, there were moments when our conversations lingered in my mind long after he left. Moments where silence felt charged instead of empty. I told myself that attention wasn't betrayal. That connection didn't mean intention. But deep down, I knew something was shifting, and pretending otherwise was becoming harder with every visit. The day everything changed didn't feel dramatic at first. It felt familiar. He came over later than usual to finish the last details. My husband had texted that he'd be working late again, like it was an afterthought. I didn't reply. I told myself it didn't matter. That I was used to it. Still, the quiet in the house felt heavier than before. We talked while he worked, but the conversation drifted away from small things. He mentioned feeling stuck, unsure if he was doing enough with his life. I admitted, without planning to, that I felt the same way. The words came out too easily. Things I hadn't said out loud before. How lonely I felt even when I wasn't alone. How I missed being looked at like I mattered. He didn't rush to fill the silence after that. He just listened. Then he said something simple, something careless, something that landed too hard. He said he saw me. Not the house, not the marriage, not the role I played. Me. That was when I felt the line I'd been tiptoeing around finally give way. I knew what I was doing. I didn't trip into it. I didn't get confused. I made a choice in a moment where I wanted comfort more than integrity. It wasn't reckless or wild. It was quiet, heavy, and real. And the second it happened, I felt two things at once, relief and regret, tangled together so tightly I couldn't separate them. There was no rush afterward. No pretending it meant nothing. We both understood it meant too much. The space between us felt different, charged with something we couldn't undo. When he finally left, the house felt unfamiliar. I sat alone, replaying every second, already wishing I could rewind time while knowing I wouldn't. That night, lying next to my husband, I realized something that hurt more than guilt. The moment didn't fix what was broken inside me. It only proved how broken it had already been. And I knew, with unsettling clarity, that nothing would ever feel simple again. After that day, everything moved forward, but nothing felt the same. The bluff was finished, clean and solid, like a problem neatly solved. My life wasn't. The neighbor's son stopped lingering. Our conversations shortened, then faded into polite distance. There were no messages, no explanations, just an unspoken agreement that whatever had happened would stay buried. That silence was its own punishment. At home, my husband sensed the shift even if he couldn't name it. He asked if I was okay more than usual, not out of concern, but suspicion. I found myself watching my words, managing my expressions, living with a constant awareness of what I'd done. The guilt wasn't loud. It was steady, following me through ordinary moments, turning routine into weight. I waited for relief that never came. The loneliness didn't disappear. It sharpened. I understood then that the affair hadn't been about desire or escape. It had been about being noticed, about someone seeing the parts of me that had been ignored for too long. That realization didn't excuse my choice. It made it harder to forgive myself. I thought about confession, about honesty, about blowing everything apart to feel clean again. But I also thought about consequences. About how some truths don't heal, they just destroy. So I carried it alone. The knowledge that I had crossed a line and could never uncross it. In the end, nothing dramatic happened. No confrontation. No closure. Just a quiet understanding that I had changed. The marriage stood on uncertain ground, not because of one moment, but because of years of silence that led to it. I learned something I wish I hadn't. That betrayal doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from neglect, from unresolved emptiness, from a single decision made when you're tired of feeling invisible. And once you make it, there's no going back to who you were before.